So I'm here with David A. Johnston, the co-founder of the BitAngels Network and one of the principals in the investment that happened on Mastercoin.
Yep, Mastercoin came through the BitAngels process back in August, and I ended up as the due diligence lead. And so I kind of nerded out on the protocol, read the white paper half a dozen times, talked a lot with J.R. Willett, about 4 conversations to wrap my head around how it all worked. And yeah, ended up being the largest deal funded by the BitAngels in 2013. What is now $5 million worth of Bitcoin was put into to the Exodus address during August.
So I may be Guyanese, but you drank the Kool-Aid, and that's a history joke. I was speaking to you earlier, and I heard about Mastercoin, and then when I heard that you were getting involved and that the BitAngels Network was getting involved, it kind of piqued my interest. Wow, hey, this is actually something that I should look into. And it's kind of confusing. So Mastercoin is Bitcoin, but it isn't Bitcoin, and it is an altcoin, but it isn't an altcoin. Can you kind of explain to us like what the heck is going on there? Because that's a little confusing.
The easiest way to think about the Master Protocol and the tokens, the Master Coins, it's a standard way to record extra information in the blockchain. In fact, Master is actually an acronym for Metadata, Archival, Standard Transaction, Embedding Records. I mean, that's literally what it does, is it embeds these records in the blockchain using transactions. And so it's a standard for how do you read that metadata. Is that a contract? Is that a stock? Is that a bond? Is that a token in a distributed application? And so it's just a standard by which all the clients that use this protocol and specification will interpret that extra data. And so specifically, this is very important for the Bitcoin community, is the core developers as part of 0.9 are enabling a new type of provably prunable outputs. And this is really critical because it gives the Master Protocol a way to encode this information without causing any bloat in the blockchain. Because these are prunable records, the nodes can choose to prune them out, and they don't end up with millions of additional transactions or metadata attached to those transactions that they don't have to keep track of. And that's a really important technical improvement that has made Mastercoin have a good way to operate in the Master Protocol, a good way to be a good steward of partnering with Bitcoin and not creating an extra burden. And so they'll, I'm sure, evolve a standard by which miners and others that are operating nodes will be incentivized to run what Gavin is calling these archive nodes. And so they'll essentially get a separate revenue stream for operating and storing this extra data in the metadata level. And so that's the basic, is we want to do these advanced features. These are things that would be difficult to include in the core Bitcoin protocol because they create new risks and new attack vectors. And so it's better to experiment with them as a separate protocol that isn't included, but is built on top of Bitcoin. And so that's really the core proposal. If you read the white paper written by J.R. Willett, he describes it as TCP/IP is the Bitcoin layer, and we're trying to do advanced things on top with HTTP, which is the Master Protocol.
Pretty much what that example means is with TCP/IP, you could type in a string of numbers and get a server, or you could type in google.com and have it render Google. Obviously, one is easier for humans to do than the other, and HTTP offered a lot of other easier things, like clicking a link and having it magically go there. That made the internet human-friendly.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is right now you're going to make Bitcoin human-friendly.
We're going to try to make Bitcoin and more advanced features human-friendly.
Tell me about, we were actually talking about something called contracts for differences. So can you explain how all those things fit together and how you're interested in that 3-letter acronym?
Right. So this is an interest I've had for about a year in the Bitcoin space, is these more advanced features that we can build on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. And one of those things that really makes a big difference is having a protocol where you can incentivize the development of these features. And so I watched other projects that have been working in this space. When Mastercoin came along, it really offered a platform where we could build not only contracts for difference, but distributed exchange, user currencies, smart property. And so to sum it up, contracts for difference is one of the more advanced features of the Master Protocol that's being implemented right now. The first features that it really required to be underlining that is the distributed exchange and the ability to issue tokens and to be able to do bets on top of the blockchain. Once you have those functions, you can use that to do contracts for difference. So for the audience that have never heard of contracts for difference, the basic idea is I'm taking a bet on one side and somebody else is taking a bet on another side. And let's say we're betting on the price of soybeans. Price of soybeans is going to be more than $50 a bushel, and the other guy says it'll be less than $50 a bushel. Well, we both put some money as part of this bet into a pool, and the data source tells us what the price of soybeans is at the end of our bet. And it's controlled by essentially the blockchain, by that data source, how much money goes to me if I was right, or how much money goes to him if he was right. And in this way, you can essentially get financial exposure to literally any asset which you have a reliable data source for. And so that's the core of a CFD. So today it's used in the market for somebody who wants to bet that soybeans are going to go up, but they don't want to buy the physical commodity. You can use this type of setup.
So if I were to do a Mastercoin contract and trust the API for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange as a pretty good decider for what the price of a commodity was, we could do this altcoin or Bitcoin-esque transaction where I take one side, you take the other side,
right.
And then a month or 3 months from now, I would be able to lock in the value of that currency, that commodity, in that contract, and then trade it as if it were that commodity.
Exactly. That's a good way of describing it. And the nice thing is there's no central party. Right. You don't have to have a central party managing this process or holding the funds. It's essentially held in escrow by the blockchain and is unlocked by one condition or another and paid out on one condition or another, all of which can be done programmatically. The only thing you have to trust is the data source. And so in the protocol, what we're looking for is ways to, one, both parties have to agree on the data source, obviously, before the CFD is created. And we're also considering ways where there would be backup data sources if for some reason that data source failed, was unavailable, corrupted, something like that. And so that'll sort of be the next step, is how do you manage the risk of the data source. But at least when it comes to the escrow, the terms of the CFD, and knowing that the funds are sitting there. I mean, you can just audit the blockchain, you can just look at the address, the funds are sitting there for that particular contract.
So I don't understand what value is there in being able to send a barrel of oil or being able to send an ounce of silver and know that it's going to, I don't get why that has value. Can you explain just what it's used in the real world and why bringing this into the cryptocurrency space is going to be of additional value to us?
Sure. So the future is uncertain, right? Nobody can predict it. And so this is often used as a way for people to hedge risk. And so if I wanted to hedge my risk, that let's say I'm producing a product and one of my main costs is, let's go back to our soybean example. And if the price of soybean shoots through the roof, I'm going to be in trouble, right? Because, all right, now my product has become much more expensive. And so CFD is one of many ways in which you could hedge this type of risk and say, okay, I'm going to take a contract, and if the price, I'm betting it's going to go up and somebody else will bet it's going to go down, I'm safe from that risk to a certain extent, depending on the length of the contract. So the classic example is Southwest. Southwest did a brilliant thing back in I think it was 2002, 2003. They bought a lot of oil options. They bought a lot of oil contracts, basically hedging their risk on the price of gas and diesel for their planes going up. And so while everybody else was struggling with these new high oil prices back in 2003, 4, and 5, when it was starting to go from $20 a barrel to $80 a barrel to $100 a barrel, airlines were completely decimated as far as their profit margin, except Southwest. Southwest had hedged their commodity risk when it came to their fuel. And they had done it for enough years in the future that they had this competitive advantage over all the other airlines for years in a row. And so that's a really good real-world example of what a company did to hedge a risk. I don't know if they used a CFD or one of the other options contracts, but it's the same sort of principle.
So in this space, that would mean that a company would use this in order to hedge and then have to use BitPay or something to convert out to be able to then buy that commodity? How would this work could you give me an example of how a company could use a contract for difference using the Mastercoin program and actually just from beginning to end?
So let's just use the Southwest example. Let's say Southwest had used this system and they hedged and took the contract and they had the additional money that is the difference between the price that went up and what the price originally was, right? That's the bet that they took as part of the CFD. And so if they were to use the system, it would be the same thing. They end up with this pool of Mastercoins or this pool of Bitcoins, whatever they've used for the CFD, and then they can turn that back into dollars or euros or yen if they need to. But of course, as the Bitcoin economy continues to grow, you probably have a place you can buy oil or whatever directly with Bitcoins. And so because these currencies are tradable and fungible, then it doesn't really matter what currency you use to do this type of activity. You're just going to trade it back into whatever you need to buy that asset.
When we're talking about contracts for differences, the other side of it is this idea of, if only we could fix the volatility problem with Bitcoin. Now, when we say contracts for differences for commodities, we really could just apply that to anything that has a spot price that we can look at. So really what you're talking about is the ability to peg Bitcoin to the dollar and then be able to trade dollars over the Bitcoin network, in effect.
That's definitely one of the most controversial aspects of the Mastercoin protocol, especially when the protocol was first proposed by JR. He had written it in a way where it was using escrow backing instead of contract for a difference in order to accomplish this. And so we'll see how that flushes out. I definitely don't want to make any claims because there's a lot more complexity to when you're dealing with that particular use case.
Let alone the legal implications.
Let alone the legal implications. And maybe this is a good point to stop and say, we encourage everybody, this is just an open source software toolkit. And you really have to know your jurisdiction, and you have to know your local laws, and you have to implement this open source in a way that makes sense. Just like with the Bitcoin protocol, it's an open source resource, and you have to implement it differently in China than you do as an exchange in the US or as you do in Tokyo. And so know your jurisdiction, know your local laws. We really encourage people to understand that when they're building things that implement this. The foundation is just focused on creating the open source standard, and we want it to be a resource the community can use to build all sorts of projects.
Maybe I'm being a little dense here, but why? So what's the difference between doing a contract for difference on Mastercoin versus a contract for difference on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange? Is it the fees? Is it the ease? What is it that's the differentiating feature? Because I just don't even understand how I do a contract for difference, so I don't understand how doing it on Mastercoin is better.
Sure, great question. So similar to the Bitcoin payment network, you've got a fraction of the fees that you would pay in a traditional, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. You've got a completely decentralized system, so you can audit anything that's going on, so you have complete transparency. You have no central party that you're trusting with the money, and so we've had that issue in the Bitcoin ecosystem where trusted third parties, if they failed, then it took forever to get the funds back to the people that rightfully owned them. And so this gives you a distributed way to store all the records. The contract for a difference, it gives you a way to do it extremely efficiently, extremely cheaply, and it gives you a way where you don't have a trusted third party. And so that's a big advantage. It really opens it up to the world of people that want to build this. And more even important perhaps is it's programmatic. Right, you could now build this into additional applications that use this for all sorts of things we're not even envisioning today in this conversation about commodities and currencies and things like that.
So walk me through this. So I have an interest in hedging against something. So I want to buy a commodity and know that 6 months from now I can still have that commodity, right?
At that price.
At that price. So I go into a contract using Bitcoin on the Mastercoin platform, and I say, hey, I want to buy 1 barrel of oil. What happens to the other party? So there's always a second party who's the opposite, who's the counterparty to that bet. What's in it for them? What do they do?
Right, so you always have to have a maker of the bet and a taker of the bet. And so ultimately people will only do things that they think are rational. So if you're offering a bet that's sort of lopsided or ridiculous, people aren't likely to take that contract. But let's say you make the bet that the price of oil is going to be $100 in a month and it's $100 today. And I'll take that bet. I'll take the bet that the price is going to be $100. If the price goes up, then you've essentially got protection from that price rise. And if the price goes down, you're pocketing that money, right? And so you can write the contract a number of ways. So it's not like there's necessarily a single standard. A lot of times there's a premium or some money set aside, if it's for the person that's taking the bet, depending on the conditions, or making the bet, depending on the conditions. So yes, you always have to have a counterparty. It has to be an economic incentive for both people. So you're making money if you're betting it's going to go down, and I'm making money if the bet goes up. So let's say it's the $100 bet, and it goes to 110. Well, we both put $100 into that pot.
So there's $200 in the pie.
Yeah, let's say there's $200, but you could do it a few ways. You could each put in 50, you could each put in 200. It depends on how much swing you wanted to make available or margin on both sides of the bet. But let's say we each put in 100, and it goes to 110. And I took the bet that it was going to stay at 100 or go lower, and you took the bet it was going to stay at 100 or go higher. You'd end up with $110, so you can now buy your barrel of oil at, essentially the $100 price because you got 10 of my dollars.
Right.
And I ended up with $90 left in the pot. So you're picking up whatever the difference is. Or let's say it went to 90, I'd end up with $110, you end up with $90. But it doesn't matter to you, because you still spent $100 to make sure you could get your barrel of oil at $100.
Right. So let's say some genius wanted to make a 6-month bet with regards to fixing the Bitcoin to the price of $1 because they just didn't care if Bitcoin went up or went down. They just wanted $1,000 to be $1,000. I'd be more than happy to take the counterparty risk to that of whether or not Bitcoin's going to go up in 6 months relative to the dollar. And then you have your schmoes who all want no volatility in Bitcoin versus the dollar to take that very valuable service and give us the returns for that.
You'd have to find a counterparty, but yes, if you could find a counterparty, then yeah. And maybe for their particular application, that's useful for them.
Right.
Maybe they're in something where they need some sort of standard unit that won't change for whatever reason.
Right.
You're certainly not in the same position, and you would be happy to collect the difference between it going up over a certain period of time. And there is a lot of fluctuation, and I don't try to make price predictions day by day or week by week or even month by month. My strategy is simply to buy and hold over the long period. I don't try to be a day trader. And so, for somebody that doesn't want to see that volatility day by day or week by week, even if it's uptrend over a year or 2 years, that may be valuable to them for their particular business application.
And just to reiterate, you don't ever, in this chain of custody of money, get the actual commodity. What you're getting is the spot price of the commodity so that you could then go and purchase that commodity.
That's exactly right. There's no delivery of the physical.
So when people are saying, well, how does this affect the real world? Well, it's a financial instrument that allows you to make sure that you can go out and purchase that thing. It's not having you get the thing.
Exactly.
Right.
That's correct. That's a good way of thinking about it.
We keep talking about shorting Bitcoin. Would a contract for difference be something that would allow markets to short the Bitcoin?
I think it could certainly be a tool that is used for that. Some people may have reasons that they want to do that. But I think that's actually a good thing. I think that's the market providing different options to different people. I think what this doesn't provide for is the type of nonsense that you do see in some of the financial markets where you have people placing bets in which they have no collateral or they have no money, often called naked shorts or naked puts or naked buys, where they don't even have that asset. They're just making the bet and they're hoping they win. And if they don't win, they have to go find the money or they default on that contract. And so that's not really possible in this kind of system. This is a system where you have to have the money to make the bet one way or another.
That gives another question, which is, are the funds that you send as collateral outside of your possession? They're no longer in your wallet during the term of that contract?
Absolutely. It's being held essentially
in the blockchain.
In the blockchain, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you've agreed to that voluntarily based on whatever the terms of the contract are.
Right.
And it'll be for whatever period you've decided.
So it's a trustless based contract.
Right. It's not, I will send funds to this address, is I have sent funds to this address.
Right. And it's just it's held in escrow, and the blockchain is the thing that executes on that. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how far do you think Mastercoin is from having something like this?
It'll be interesting to see how quickly it gets developed. It's definitely on the radar of the core developer team. First, you need the distributed exchange,
right,
and then you can build all these type of systems on top of that, because that's where you have the recording and the moving of all these different tokens and such around. So, but it's on the short-term roadmap. I don't want to get into an exact date because I don't want to get into the 2 weeks.
Soon, TM.
Exactly. We try to be pretty conservative, but it's definitely on the radar. I definitely want to get credit to Vitalik for suggesting originally the contracts for difference, and he did some work on the master protocol to hammer out some of those details. So I definitely want to give him credit for that suggestion. And when he did, the core developers were very excited about this as an improvement to what had originally been proposed in the original spec. And so now it's in the official Master Protocol spec. So it is in the spec. It's going to get implemented.
And when we talk about things that have markets adopt Bitcoin, where do you see contracts for differences taking off? Because I hear that Europe is really big on this, and Australia apparently is really big on this down under. Like, is this something that'll bring those markets much further into Bitcoin? Or we keep talking about, well, when are the hedge funds going to get involved? When are the hedge funds going to get involved? Is this something that will really, wet the beak to the point where they can't ignore it?
I think it'll bring in a whole new demographic of people that work in these type of financial instruments. Once they realize how efficient they are, they'll be the ones bringing a lot of expertise to this system and bringing in a lot of institutional funds into this system. The cool thing with the Master Protocol is we can actually build that as use case on top of Bitcoin. So literally all the money for this will have to flow through the Bitcoin network in order to get there, which is a fun side effect of building protocols on top of Bitcoin. Is it massively increases the use case and utility of Bitcoin itself.
And I'm guaranteeing you that right now there's someone thinking, oh great, that's exactly what Bitcoin needs, more bankers. But you know what? Our boat's big enough for everybody. If they play by our rules, there's very little that they could actually do to us. And quite frankly, if you see someone on a sinking ship, how could you not send them a life raft, right? So,
right.
So the more the merrier, right?
Yeah, we got to help these guys out.
Yeah, we really got to help them from drowning there. So thank you so much for talking, and I would love to see Mastercoin actually be able to do that. I will be the first person to take the hedge against the dollar side of the Bitcoin equation.
Sounds great.
Have a great day, man.
You too.
CryptoKit is the world's first Chrome browser Bitcoin wallet. It's the easiest, fastest Bitcoin wallet payment system. With a simple one-click install, it takes just seconds to get your wallet set up. And because CryptoKit finds the address and payment for you, there's no more fussing around or tab switching. CryptoKit is more than just a wallet. It comes with a preloaded PGP encrypted social network, news feeds from Reddit and Google, and up-to-date charts from exchanges. Finally, CryptoKit Directory allows you to make two-click payments with any of the BitPay merchants. Once you install CryptoKit, you won't need anything else. For more information or to download CryptoKit, visit CryptoKit.com.